Good morning, everybody. How are you all? Thanks for coming along as ever, and we've got quite a good turnout today. Hopefully there's enough food for everybody. It's great to see you all here at this hour, and the enduring power of Lego seems to be a thing that we can all relate to. Chad might mention it, but I'd just like to mention to you all that there is another session following on from this one this time next week. We'll email everybody the room number. It's a different room, and it's a building session. It's a more practical hands-on session, so we'll get to the details of that later, and I'll email that out to you. So keep your calendars clear for 8 a.m. next Thursday if you're keen for some building. Excuse me. So before we get going, I'd just like to acknowledge country. I'd like to acknowledge this meeting's being held on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. So without further ado, I'll hand over to our very own Dr. Chad Habel, and he's going to take the session through to 9 o'clock. If you have any questions in the last 10 minutes or so, we'll get to some of those. So thanks very much, Chad.
Thanks, Stuart. Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming at this early morning. Actually, I'll hang on to that for a moment. We do have a quick activity here, and so I'm going to ask someone, if you're in the room, if you're not in the room, I apologise. But this doesn't work so well for you. I asked everyone to pick a minifigure from the front of the table, and this is a bit of an activity we do. It's a very brief introductory activity to a LEGO Serious Play session. And the question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? So I'm going to ask someone in the audience, someone random in the audience, to pass me the minifigure and talk about, so I can show which one it is, and talk about, Amy, why did you choose this minifigure as the one that you want to grow up to be?
I chose the shark, and I think that sharks are very tenacious. They kind of go after what they want without hesitation, and they're skills that I would like to have when I grow up, when I'm older.
Great, thank you. I'll give this back to you for the session. You do have to return the minifigures at the end of the session. I'm sorry, you don't get to take them home. And thank you, Amy. We do LEGO Serious Play is often used for business. So we often do workshops with finance professionals, and the shark is quite useful in that perspective. So welcome to my session this morning, where I'm talking a little bit about LEGO Serious Play and some of what it is and how we've done it in a particular project here at the University of South Australia in collaboration with colleagues from the college and Amy from the University of Adelaide. So you might see there's also thanks to Jenny Stokes, Anthea Fudge, Amy Robinson, thank you Amy, in the room, and Bianca Price as well. So I'm not the only one working on this project. If you've seen the Lego movie, you'll know everything is awesome when you're part of a team, and it's an awesome team to be a part of. One thing I did want to show you, in the right in the front office of the TIU is a quotation from John Dewey, saying to be playful and serious at the same time is possible, and it defines the ideal mental condition. And that's really summarises what LEGO Serious Play is about. Playful learning, bringing seriousness and play together. And one of the things that surprises people about LEGO Serious Play is precisely how serious it can be. People go, oh, I thought it'd just be, a bit naff, a bit of fun, but actually it was really great. And I'm like, I know, right? Like, I said that. So, yeah. So that's our introductory activity. That's something we do with students as well in the project. And I'll be able to show some of the responses that students and some staff colleagues have had to that question as well. This is me. This is an introduction to me. You'll see a more recent photo on the bottom left, but that photo in the top right is from the mid-80s there. You might notice the Commodore 64. And if anyone's interested in old hardware, the old cassette tape player from the Commodore 64, where you used to have to press play and it would load for about 45 minutes, and then you'd get this 8-bit game that was pretty terrible to start with anyway. And if it didn't work, you'd have to go back to the beginning. They were the days. You could, yeah, on the Ghetto Blaster tape-to-tape play, yeah, that's right. So really the context of this project, which is a research project and a teaching and learning project, I'm talking mostly about the research today, is access to university. So most universities will have an equivalent to UniSA College. You have the UPP, University Preparatory Program in Adelaide, the Foundation Program at Flinders, and at UniSA we have the UniSA College. So there's a door into the university, an entry door into the university. And if you know this area, it's kind of actually just down that street. You can probably see the door from that window right there. So this is the door that students come into university. Many of us have been in universities so long, we're a bit institutionalized, and we forget what it's like to come through that door. And that's one of the interesting things about access and enabling programs. The fascinating thing about this door, and this is just by pure chance, I'm sure, but the fascinating thing about this door is right next to it is this. So you look at this entry door and you look left and it's like tripping hazard, deadly chemicals and danger and things like that. So the overall perspective is this. Don't get the wrong door because you might die. So it's a fascinating metaphor for what university is about and what it's like for students who are new to the university environment, not even just new to university environment, new to formal learning environments, or new to professional environments generally. You know, just the idea of being in a formal place where you come to things on time and you come to the meetings you're supposed to come to and things like that. So that's a fascinating metaphor there. More formally, the context is around enabling education and pedagogies. So at the University of South Australia, there's a foundation program and a diploma of tertiary studies that has 1,000+ students, which is almost certainly the largest in South Australia. It's definitely up there, one of the largest programs here. And this is to do with UniSA's mission to provide tertiary education to a broad section of society, a mission that they actually deliver on. Lots of universities talk about it, but don't deliver on it in this way. There's two ways of thinking about these sorts of programs. We tend to think about them as pathways. So we think of them as learning technical skills. You know, how do you write an essay? How do you do an exam? Discipline-specific knowledge. This is a pathway, an ordered system solution to try and get people into university. There's other ways of thinking about these programs, though, more complex ways. We talk about enabling pedagogies. So pedagogies which enable students to operate in the environment, kind of more broadly. A lot of theory about academic literacies. So academic literacies not being just reading and writing, even just reading and writing disciplinary specific work in particular contexts, particular genres of writing, but also operating interpersonally in the institutional environment. And we might think of the university as a complex system. We might, in Ronald Barnett's terms, take an ecological approach to the university. So the question then becomes, how do you not build a student's skills to come into university and succeed at university? How do you help them learn to operate as a part of the ecology of the university, which is a much more complex thing? And so I had the suspicion that LEGO Serious Play might help with these more challenging and complex questions. And so the grant we got was via the Student Engagement Unit and the Student Services and Amenities Fund. This is the first university I've been at where there's a grant program based on the SAF. So this is the money that students pay, $200, $300 a year or so, to have access to services, support services, and that's how they fund sports associations and unions and things like that. And this money is made available via a grant program, which is actually kind of quite nice. The thing I love about this grant and this project is that most of the money from this grant goes to the students to help them, for them to help us facilitate the sessions and for catering and things like that. So they're paying money and it goes back to them anyway. So we're not kind of eating that up. The LEGO Serious Play method is based on, if you're familiar with Kolb's experiential learning cycle or reflective learning, things like that, this is basically what it is. What you'll do is you'll set a question. The question may be, what do you want to be when you grow up? Select an avatar, like we did this morning. You'll then build, okay? You actually selected the avatar, but we often have, you know, bags of Lego and you'll build the model. You then share, so you'll go around or you'll speak to the larger group and talk about your model. You'll then have questions. So the idea is bringing your mental models to the surface and then discussing them. And then you'll capture and reflect. So you'll take photos, you'll think about it. Sometimes you'll write down on a little kind of artifact card, we call them, a little vignette that helps you capture and reflect your thinking. The whole process is designed to bring your mental models into the real world, to help you articulate your mental models, share them with other people, and then they can become a basis of conversation. And it's actually kind of a bit magic as well. It's amazing how effectively it works. So that's the method. The theoretical framework behind the research project, I can talk about this stuff quite a lot, but there's a big paper still influential in academic language and learning, Lee and Street's academic literacies work, which shifts more towards those complex ideas of student identity and belonging in the institution. Notions of self-efficacy, academic self-efficacy, Albert Bandura from social cognitive theory, The idea of ecological universities from Barnett, which he just wrote his book on that last year in October 2017, so very recent. Donnell and Meadows' idea of complex systems. The idea of a complex system is that you can't control it, you can't direct it, you can only dance with it, you can only learn to be with it and manage it. That's a kind of ecological approach as well. And then ideas of playful learning in Michel Serket, who's a Danish academic. So we can talk about theory as long as you like, but I'll get more into the research itself. So we have two groups of participants. Group one is a group of peers, so peer facilitators. So these are students who came through UniSA college. So again, non-traditional students who didn't come through via year 12 or things like that. They've come through the foundation program, but they've come through and been successful, kind of whatever that is. Generally meaning they've gotten into their program, gotten into their degree, and they're in their second or third year. They often become peer mentors. So this kind of combines nicely with the college's peer mentoring program. And they're there to help us facilitate the activity. The idea here is that, you know, we have maybe 6 tables like this, and me being the sole facilitator is not really the best way to do it. It's really best to have one person at each table. So I'm kind of the arch facilitator, I guess. And then you've got students, peer facilitators or peer mentors that are helping facilitate at each table. So this is a classic peer learning kind of method, right? The students are helping other students do the workshop, but they're also learning a lot themselves. And then the new students are also meeting a peer. They've got some modeling going on. They meet someone who's been through the same pathway as them and has succeeded, and building social connections as well. So that's group one, and groups 2+ are the new students. And then we have a whole series of workshops. Our idea here was that quite often with orientation and enabling sessions, you do one at the beginning and you're oriented, cool, get on with it sort of thing. We know that's not really how it works in transition pedagogies. So we're doing workshops throughout the whole year. We've got a peer training workshop, 3 student workshops, the potential for some interviews or focus groups, a peer reflective workshop where we get those peer mentors or those kind of more senior students in to do another workshop, and then more kind of focus groups. And then there's an iterative design or action research design of analysis. So we do a peer training, we analyze some of the data from that. That feeds into the design of the first workshop. Then we analyze that, that feeds into the second workshop. We take all of those 4 workshops, that feeds into the design of one of those final workshops, and then it's that kind of iterative action research, analysis, and ongoing design of the project. Really what that does is it helps us go, how did that session go? Was that question for the build really effective, or could it be better? Could we adapt it on the fly? That's the kind of design and analysis there. The workshops themselves, the types of things we ask, so that question part of the methodology is, what do you want to be when you grow up? I quite like that one. In the Lego Serious Play community, sometimes they don't like minifigures at all. I just find them too fun to not do. They're really quick, they're easy, they don't require any technical skills of building, and they're a really effective kind of way in and something to talk about. You also get some really interesting conversations about identity and identity in place and how people feel they fit or belong or not. So we often do that as a very introductory activity. We came up in our iterative design, we did some analysis, and then we decided actually what we want to do is we want to ask the students, what's the best thing that happened to you this week? This is in their first week of university. So rather than, you know, what are your challenges? What's stressing you out? What are you hating? Where are your pain points? What's the best thing that happened? So that it's kind of an appreciative inquiry type approach. You can do modeling the university. So what does the university mean to you? Build the university. People tend to use lots of big bricks and castle pieces and things like that, which is quite interesting. And if you are interested in the workshop next week, the build workshop next week, we'll be building the future university. What's our vision of the future university? What is Enterprise 25? I'm going to ask David Lloyd if he'd like to come. He might be busy, but I don't know. And future selves. How do you see yourself in the future? So how do you see yourself after the foundation program? How do you see yourself after your degree? What kind of professional identity will you have? So this ties in with some of those ideas about professional identities and transitioning into them. So a lot of these things are about articulating thoughts, articulating mental models, and envisioning. Okay. I should also mention that mostly Lego Serious Play is used for business. So strategy sessions, vision sessions, and things like this. The idea is that rather than the CEO and the management delivering the strategy, we actually have a conversation about what the strategy is going to be, and people have a lot more buy-in and things like that. So that's what we do in the workshops. Our analysis has a kind of triangulation sort of approach. There's an interesting thing here. So we have a fairly standard kind of data source where when participants are sharing their models, we record that and then we transcribe that. So we have a qualitative research approach about just the conversation that's going on there. One of the interesting things we've noticed already is that the people who are building talk a lot more than they do in a standard focus group or interview. There's a lot less work to do the elicitation. It kind of happens more spontaneously and naturally. And that's a kind of a node that we'll look at to see how that works. Also what happens is they use little artifact cards. They're called like kind of colorful, kind of like Post-its, but a lot more kind of sturdy, big, kind of permanent, I guess, in a way, a lot more kind of professional looking. And they write down those 3 words or those 3 ideas for their build to help capture and reflect what it is. We take a photo of that so that we have like we take that as a kind of a vignette. So a way of capturing what they think about the model. And then we have a photo of the model as well. And I'll show you some examples of these as well. We have a photo of the model as well so that we can then analyze the model and we can start thinking about, well, are they using lots of color? What types of pieces are they using? Simple things like you've got in a Lego Serious playset, you've got Duplo, Lego and Technic. And so are they using more Technic? Are they using more Duplo? Are they going for more abstraction? Things like that. So you can actually analyze the model themselves. Engineers or people with an engineering background tend to use lots of Technic, and that's great. And they tend to make moving models, and it tends to be about getting the thing to move and getting the thing to work, which is fine. That's quite interesting. We also have all of the researchers doing the analysis. So we're looking for inter-rater reliability there, okay? Because it's obviously a qualitative research project. There's some subjectivity to the analysis. So we want to have a conversation about how we're analysing things. One of the things that we want to do, which is quite challenging from a number of perspectives, is have the students have input into analysis as well, especially those peers as well. So this is a kind of a partnership research model or a kind of participatory design type research model that's happening there. So that's interesting. This kind of heads towards some of the really interesting methodological issues around this project, which I'll talk about later. Some of the themes from our initial analysis, so from the initial peer workshop, these are the types of things that tended to come up a fair bit. There's a lot of talk about power and authority. So there was a lot of talk about, hierarchies and power and institutional authority, particularly in the university, and where that's located. There was a lot of talk about expertise and getting it right. It's fascinating when you get people with Lego, particularly when they're building, people want to kind of get it right, especially if there's an authority figure in the room. They're like, oh, I'm not sure, is this right? Am I going to get this right? Or I don't know if I can do it right. Or I can't build with Lego. I've never done it before. I'm not good with Lego. So there's this thing about technical expertise or getting it right in the actual facilitation itself. That tends to fall away a little bit quite nicely. It's pretty quick. When people start building, it kind of comes naturally. But it'll be interesting to see whether or not that aligns with some of those other kind of power authority things, whether the less expert students are more likely to be worried about that expertise thing or getting it right. A lot of stuff about teachers, learners, community. So people will be building models that represent what the teacher is, what the learner is, what the connections are, what the learner community is like, how that's supported them or not. On the obverse of that, senses of isolation or being separate or whatever are also another thing. Things about goals, movement, structures. So here's my goal. This is where I want to go. I'm moving towards it. Quite often, models that use wheels or mobile things, or there's some sense of movement, which is very fascinating when you have someone presenting their Lego model and they're moving pieces and things like that, and then it breaks and it falls over and they go, oh no, sort of thing, which is a fascinating thing. It's really live. And a methodological challenge as well, which I'll talk about again later. And then a lot about identity, past identities, who I was before, what I want to be in the future, what are the limits and opportunities around identities. Is it safe? Is it safe to come to university? Is it safe to change your identity? A huge thing for students from low SES backgrounds in particular. And some of my earlier work has looked at how people's lives actually break when they enter the university. They lose husbands and wives, they lose friends. People start saying to them, oh, you think you're smart, you're going to university now. It actually breaks down their social structures. So there's a lot of risk in the transition to university, which actually gets articulated quite nicely in LEGO Serious Play. Doesn't get articulated very well in interviews. I can tell you because I've done them. People don't talk about that very much, but it's much easier to elicit that with LEGO Serious Play. The thing about safety and risk is particularly fascinating. I've got a headset on about adaptive leadership at the moment, which is all about what is safe to say. Is change safe? No, it's not. Change is all about risk and loss. So there's some interesting themes there. So they're the kinds of themes that are coming up in the analysis. Here are some of the findings. So the good thing about this project is it's quite fun. It's great. But you get really, really visual data, which is fantastic. So the avatar question, select an avatar. What do you want to be when you grow up? Here's what one student selected. Selected the witch. So this is an example of the data. And there's one of the artifact cards. And this is capturing the data. So this student was saying, I selected the witch because the witch is kind of mystical, kind of magical. You don't really know everything about it. The witch is really smart, but in abnormal ways. Okay, so not conventionally smart, but in ways that you don't expect, which is just fascinating. A little bit different. So the witch is a little bit different, and the witch is very resourceful. And we then have a conversation about that. One of the fascinating things about this is that in the conversation, it didn't come up that the builder or the participant here is male, actually. So there's a thing about identity and maybe gender, or maybe not, I don't know. But that's something that didn't come up in the conversation. So students here are able to kind of articulate their sense of identity, who they are, how they see themselves, maybe desired identities as well, the way they wish to be seen by others could be part of it as well. So that's a good example there. Another example here is from a staff member. So we get some really interesting contrasts because we have staff involved as well. And so this is a very experienced lecturer in the college in enabling education who saw herself as the protector. So this figure here is, I don't know, it looks a bit like Galadriel, but I think it's a kind of general elf warrior princess type thing. As a protector, as a defender, there to defend the students and look after them. Quite courageous, getting out there and you know, having a go. Is an explorer, doing new things all the time, a researcher, and that it's all about adventure. These conversations are fascinating because the staff member is in this conversation with students. So students are beginning to see how staff see themselves as breaking down these barriers between students. And the idea for a student, the idea that a staff member needs to be courageous to do their job is quite insightful, is quite interesting. So that's the kind of thing that comes up with the avatar activity. University, we say build the university, or what does the university mean to you? Here's one. Now, it says scientist at the top because the way that we're coding the data is we get them to do an avatar activity and that then becomes their pseudonym or their code name for the data analysis. So then they write their name, their code name at the top of it. So this is a fascinating one because you'll see lots of castle pieces being used. So for students and staff, lots of walls, lots of solid structures, impenetrable structures, and these grey castle pieces you can see there are quite common to be used, and fences and barriers and things like that. So the fascinating thing was looking at the model, it looks like really, really solid and really unwelcoming. But this student was saying that there's an accepting doorway to education. So they've got the figure there, the minifigure there, and a window that they're looking into. So there is a doorway. There's this acknowledgement that there are lots of barriers and that the institution can be quite closed, but here's a way in. Okay, so there's a sense of opportunity there as well. And then one path of many. So they acknowledge that the path we're on is only one path of many. There's lots of different ways of doing it. So that kind of diversity of approach is there as well. This one was from a staff member. Again, the same staff member as previously. We said build the university, and they built a zoo. So she was the protector, and sorry, I'm out of the camera shot here, so I can read this. It's a zoo. It's a zoo full of people, and a diversity of people and animals, and the people sometimes act like animals. There are lots of different personalities. Sometimes difficult personalities, sometimes conflictual personalities. There's a lot of difference. It can be really scary, it can be confronting, it can be hard. it's beyond place. So a fascinating thing here is that the student had a very emplaced or very embodied kind of build around what the university is. But this was a much more abstract kind of model of what the university is. That there are challenges and lots of different motives going on at the university for lots of different people here. So again, this is a fascinating insight for students to see how a staff member sees their workplace or sees the university. It kind of demystifies the institution in some ways, kind of makes it real, gives us some language or some grammar to be able to talk about it. We have some good news stories. So when we talk about enabling education, we have lovely good news stories. It's great. Students come in, social mobility, their opportunities for life are enhanced, they're transformed, transformative learning, it's wonderful. Okay, there's a lot of that discourse around. So these are from the students, from the new students. So he wrote himself as Dirk Gently, if you know that TV show and the books. And he says, there are more choices for my future. It's a very simple model. So one of the axes of analysis you can use on the visual analysis is the simplicity or the complexity of the model. So you can see here, this is a kind of I think it's a castle figure, a castle build or piece at the back there, and that's behind him. I think we asked why he used the square eye for the head, and it's just the only thing that was available, I think. That's what they tends to have. It's all I could find. Doesn't mean anything at all. Don't read too much into it. But no, that's what we're here to do. We read a lot into it. That's the job we have. But he's got that wall behind him and he's facing away. So more possibilities for my future. This was a student who'd had a very challenging first week, like seriously about to drop out, just cannot cope type first week. But overall, his perspective was, you know, this is about opportunity. This is about opening up. This is great. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? This one here on the right is quite a bit more complex. This was, their minifigure was Plantera, and this is everything coming together. So there's this sense of cohesion or coherence, everything coming together, everything starting to work, that there's a spark of knowledge. Okay, so I think he was probably talking about, you can see probably on the top right of the model, the little yellow transparent piece, that's the kind of spark of knowledge that's happening, which is kind of quite a nice metaphor for learning and research and new experiences and things like that. And then connections form randomly. So you can see this model is a lot more complex. You do a very simple analysis of the number of pieces in a model. If you count the minifigure as one, on the left model there's 3 pieces. On the right model there's probably, I haven't counted, 15 or 20. So there's a much more complex model there. Is it more abstract or less abstract? There might not be a correlation there, but it's a much more complex model with moving parts. So people often use the moving parts when they're talking about them, but there's this sense of connection. So connection is a very strong theme that comes up, and connection is a central theme to ecological thinking as well. So that's a fascinating thing as well. We get students talking about connection, building connections. That's learning, and that's some of the social work that needs to be done to kind of make that work. So these are some of the good news stories. You see these ones and it's lovely, isn't it? It's great. But it's not always, as we know, it's not always good news stories in teaching and learning, especially in the enabling space. So there are some concerns. There's one student who, we'd have to look at the transcript. I can't remember what the question was. This might have been what's the best thing that happened to you this week? And he built a big question mark, right? That was all he had. And then he wrote it down and he wrote a question mark. And looking at this is where, you know, research and capturing data doesn't really do justice to the lived experience. What do you do with that? That's like an absence. How do you analyze that? What does that mean? You might look at the other builds that the student has made or the conversation around it or whatever, but this is like kind of concerning. This is kind of like, what's going on for this student? That maybe it's the technical challenge or the social challenge in the build or the workshop, but there's a kind of absence, there's a gap, there's some kind of problem here, there's something that's kind of not working, or maybe it's an opening up. Maybe he's open to questions, things like that, but maybe it's kind of concerning. So you've got these kind of couple of different threads of the builds and of the analysis that are coming out. Now we're very early on in the project, so we've done 2 or 3 workshops, I think now. So we're starting to gather the analysis, we're getting the transcriptions done, but this is still quite early days. I think one of the things we've found is that an hour is not long enough. for a Lego Serious Play workshop. Generally in the community, they say 3 or 4 hours minimum time slot. If you come next week, it is only an hour because it's just a taster. So I'm not going to take 3 or 4 hours of your time. But an hour is not long enough for those really rich, deep conversations, and you can't get through many questions. It's not actually about getting through questions. It's about elaborating, getting that depth. But anybody knows from a teaching and learning environment, you've never got enough time, right? An hour is never long enough. So that's kind of how that works. Some of the findings we're coming up with. So that's some of the findings we have on the student experience and using the data. But there are some very interesting things about the methodology as well. So we're finding that the general framework is a kind of a qualitative or a narrative approach, okay, which is really fairly well established. It kind of aligns with art therapy approaches as well. So, so we've had people say, oh, do you know about rich pictures? Yep, we know about rich pictures. Do you know about, collages and Play-Doh and this and that? So there's lots of different kind of hands-on artistic type approaches, and it aligns with that fairly well. And also aligns with design approaches, design and research approaches around design analysis and things like that. There's a strong theme of elicitation going on. So is one of our key research questions is Lego Serious Play genuinely better for eliciting people's perspectives and lived experiences than kind of other ones? So we've got another research project where we did a whole bunch of interviews with enabling program students, so we can kind of compare some of that data with some of this to look at the conversations that are happening and see how that happens. Then it kind of gets a bit crazy because we have a visual analysis kind of approach as well. So when you've got those models, you can analyze the models, and that's, for me, that's quite challenging. My academic background is English literature, so I'm used to reading books of people who've been dead for hundreds of years and then talking about that. So it's a very different type of research for me and for many of the people in the team. But what do you do? How do you analyze it visually? And we very quickly find that a photograph, a two-dimensional representation of the build, is quite limited in the analysis. What I'd love to do is have a 3D scanner and get people's models in there and scan them 3D so that you can use them and then analyze that, and then have a printer off on the side, so a 3D printer off on the side so that you can then print out their builds and then they get to take that home. But that obviously has technical challenges. And the more you bring in things like that, the more it kind of stifles some of the creativity, some of the spontaneity. It's like, even with the record, I mean, as you know, with collecting, anytime you collect data, it changes it automatically. So having the recording there when people are talking about their models, that automatically changes things. And then it's like, oh, no, stop being creative. I've got to take a photo of your creativity for the research. So there's some interesting things there. The most mind-blowing and interesting thing for me is this kind of haptic analysis, or this idea of haptic research in some quite cutting-edge art. It's all about installation art. It's all about touch and feel. So when people are building, when they're actually going through the process of building and then presenting, they're actually touching and feeling. It's a very visceral, physical sort of experience. How do you even begin to think about that as a data source? There are ways of doing it through design in particular, but that's a kind of a fascinating thing. How do you capture that moment when, one of my favorite moments in Lego Serious Play sessions is when people build something, and you'll often do iterations, right? So you'll build something and then you'll add to it and then you'll add to it, and then you get the group to bring it together into a synthetic model, a synthesized model, and then you go, okay, we're done. Time for the next one. Break it, throw it away. And they go, oh, really? Do I have to? Yeah, you have to break it. Take a photo, it's fine. And it's this kind of, mandala experience where they have to let go and connect with the transience of all life and things like that. So that's an interesting moment. I'd love to do that as a kind of a mindfulness research project, or a kind of, dealing with grief and loss and things like that. So anyway, there's a lot going on in the methodology that I think is quite interesting too. So I've tried to leave some time for questions, which is great. And this is a conclusion of sorts. I'll ask for questions in a moment, but an invitation to play. If you are on campus, then Stuart will be sending out an email to everyone who registered about a session next week. That's going to be held not here, but at the Innovation and Collaboration Centre. So we've got that venue there, just kind of down the road a little bit. So this is going to be building the future university. So the Vice Chancellor sent around an email recently saying, Enterprise 25, what is it? What do we want to be? And I think the best way to have that conversation is to build what it might look like and then have conversations around that. So I've had a lot of people say, oh, I thought we were going to build stuff. Don't we get to do some Lego? And I'm like, no, this is kind of a standard presentation, a kind of standard deliver type presentation. But we will have an opportunity to do that. So keep an eye on your email. Also, please connect with me. And this is particularly for anyone who's online. Feel free to send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. You just search Chad Habel. There's not too many of us around. My mobile number's there if you want to send me a coffee. Send me a virtual coffee, please. My mobile number's there if you want that for some reason. Email and LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me, and I do like coffee. So if you want to just chat about either this project or about you're kind of interested in it or how it might apply to different contexts, it does apply to many different contexts. So it's used in health and business and design and things like that. There are some things that LEGO Serious Play is not right for. I'll have to say that. It's not a panacea. It's not a solution to every problem. The thing for me is that, you know, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's kind of how I feel at the moment. But there are definitely things that LEGO Serious Play is not designed for, particularly when you want to deliver a vision or deliver or transmit something. It's not like that. Or when an organization is in a crisis phase, it's not really good for that. It's like, we're in crisis, we've got a major change management process. Half of you are losing your jobs, let's play with Lego. That kind of doesn't really work. And there are some reasons behind that. I can talk about frameworks and reasons behind that. So get in contact with me, please, if you want. And thank you for joining us online. We'll have time for some questions at the moment. Also, that invitation also applies to you online as well. Please send me an email. We can Skype. We can have a conversation online. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have a budget, I'll come and visit you. That's fine. And we'll leave it there for now for the delivery part of the presentation, and I'll take some questions if you like.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chad. That was very interesting. Before we take some questions from the room, I'd just like to say, if you're going to ask a question in the room, can you please say your name and if you feel like it, where you come from, your institution. But before we begin, I have a very pressing and serious question for you. As a 12-year-old moving here from the UK, I moved to Adelaide, and I was very alarmed by people calling it Lego.
Yes. Threatening.
And we were very upset in our family about that and didn't know how to deal with it. Can you give us your take on it?
Yes, I can try. Both are legitimate. They're both okay. For someone with a PhD in English, I actually don't care about being pedantic about language very much. And they're actually both legitimate. My read on it is that in the 80s and 90s, Lego, I say Lego because that's what they use in the rest of the world and in Denmark in particular. So that's what, and it comes from the Danish leg godt, which means play well. So that's kind of where I get it from. Lego is also absolutely fine. I think that what happened, my read is that what happened is that Lego decided to try and localize the pronunciation in South Australia only, apparently. And so it's genuinely, like they had advertising campaigns and they tried to make it a thing. And then they went, oh no, we're not doing that anymore. And the rest of the country didn't catch up. And so so I think they're both legitimate and it's fine. I think it's
I disagree. Safe. It's not okay. But
okay,
anyway,
we'll fight about it later. Each to
their own. Okay. Okay.
I'm Steve Kelly from Interior Architecture. So I play with Lego lots. I understand it that there was an importer, the distributor of Lego, wanted to posh it up for South Australia. And it's isolated to South Australia, a little bit of Sydney, because she was trying to import in Sydney, and the west coast of the United States, so California. And you get that in Mythbusters when they did the Lego build. Okay, yep. And some of them are calling it Lego, some of them are calling it Lego. Yep. And it's because where the distributor was trying to break the market.
It makes a lot of sense, because Adelaide is a lot more posh in our language anyway. We say dance, not dance, don't we? So it kind of works. Yeah.
Okay, let's get down to some serious...
Yes, a better question.
Okay, any questions in the room? Okay, we've got some questions online and I'll try and alternate, so...
Thank you, Chad. Sian here from UniSA Library, and I'm from the UK, as you can tell, so I'm definitely Team Lego. My question is, a lot of the sessions that we do for students tend to be one-shot sessions, and I was wondering, how does the Lego Serious Play fit in with when you've only got one opportunity to speak for them rather than a series?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, obviously the dream is to have iterative stuff and do it again and again. The idea in working with companies is that you build a culture of creativity and play and innovation, connection, collaboration, and all that sort of thing through having serious series of things. In reality, you only get to do it once. And I would say, you know, one dose is better than none. What you would do is, the design is really important. The design of the session is really important. So you would have a conversation about, what are we trying to achieve here? It's basically a curriculum design kind of discussion. What are we trying to achieve here? What do we want students to get away with? What resources do we have? Like, how much time do we have? You know, is it likely we're going to have it once or twice or whatever? And then how do you kind of make the most of that time that you do have with them? And it's better than nothing, but it can be limited. Yeah, you're right. It's hard. I've done a lot of work in academic language and learning, and when you only have people for a certain amount of time, you really want to leverage it to try and get the best. I guess the other thing that I would say is that the approach is a kind of, I guess, in a way, non-teleological. So, in a way, you kind of, playing with Lego is wasting time, right? We all know that. And I love wasting time. I think we actually need to waste time more. I think if we let go a little bit of this obsession of, we've got to achieve, we've got to get KPIs, we've got to do this, we've got to get bang, 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 outcomes all the time, then actually we can be a lot more productive. So I think if you've got an hour with students, sitting down with them and spending some time to reflect and share insights and explore and do that in a relaxed way and open up actually is really productive in a non-traditional way. It's not productive. You know, they're not going to be able to do a NAPLAN test and get high scores and things like that, but there's plenty of places that are doing that already. So in a way, what we need to do is kind of shift our thinking about productivity and what we're trying to achieve and things like that. So, but that's challenging as well, I know. Does that answer? Yes.
A question from online from Hong Mai. It's a fairly heavy question. It's a big question, Chad.
Bring it on.
In this digital time, anyone can basically acquire knowledge from online resources, and most of them have alternative free version. Why do students need to pay a lot of money to come to university?
Oh. Yep. Maybe they don't. It's not really a question about Lego Serious Play, is my challenge there. But you're absolutely right. Here's the challenge that we've got. What is the value proposition of coming to university? I talk about this with lecturers a lot, right? What's the value proposition of coming to a lecture, right? People go, I don't want to record my lectures because then they don't turn up. Why are they not turning up? Because there's no value proposition there. If students stop seeing the value proposition of coming to university, then they're going to stop coming. That's kind of just how it works. They don't come anymore just because they have to or they're expected to or their status or whatever. So a very good question, and the answer may be, maybe there is no point. Maybe university is the place that you can come to do Lego Serious Play sessions where you don't get to do it anywhere else. I'll try that. But thank you. Good question. Yes.
Hi, Ian Walton from Flinders University, and I've waited 30 years to hear somebody talk about play being so important.
Thank you.
I've done quite a few bits of study in that myself, and I know where you're going and where you're coming from.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And because of that, we've incorporated, I lecture to postgraduate students in health, doctors, yes, nurses, etc., etc. Yep. And we've incorporated Lego into our course, and we've incorporated a lot of play things into our particular course.
Wonderful.
Yes and no.
Yes.
The interesting thing is that when you put these events into your course, you start working out those students who are struggling, those who are advanced, and now you're left with the dilemma, how do I provide the additional support? You've only got so many hours to do a lecture, and I found that last year the number of hours I've spent because of these play series trying to help those who need help has doubled and tripled. And now people are saying, hey, you're spending way too much time on it. Your message about what happens through play when you identify those at risk and then help them, and the rewards are why I keep pushing the extra hours. It's enormous. So my question, after that long-winded introduction, is that once you've highlighted these at-risk type students, or those who just want to grow, where does the support come from? Because even in your example, that's the challenge that you would face. Thank you.
Absolutely. In our example, it's kind of easy because we go, oh, that's the college. we do a partnership. The research and all of that is a partnership with the college, and we go, that's kind of the college's problem, I guess, in a way. I guess it has to come from somewhere. That's the thing, and this is the fundamental challenge about massification and universalization of university, and our preoccupation with retention and all of that. And one of the problems is that universities say they want to do these things, but actually when it comes down to questions of resources and status and things like that, it becomes a lot more concerning. And I definitely feel your pain because having worked in enabling education and in academic language and learning a lot, it's a challenge because you want to give more. But what I would say is that possibly these approaches, I would, if I were you, just for your own sanity, try and resist that temptation to just give and give and give and give, because it can be counterproductive in the end. But that what we can do is using these methods, using these approaches, particularly if you're capturing things and the picture is really clear, then that's something that you can use for influence to try and change upwards or try and change the culture. Have some kind of influence around, yeah, okay, people need help. What are we going to do about that? What are we going to do about that as an institution? What is the culture of our, how does our system respond to that? Because problem students like that cause disruption and cause discomfort in the system, right? Now that's a good thing because that's an opportunity for change. So the thing to do is to, now this is adaptive leadership hat on, sorry. The thing to do is then manage that discomfort, okay? The discomfort can't get too high because then it crashes and you can't have change, but you don't want that comfort. So ignoring the problem keeps us all comfortable and safe and happy, and that's fine, right? But when you're creating, so playful approaches can create discomfort, create disequilibrium in the system. And then if you're able to manage that, it's very hard skill and takes a lot of skill, then change starts to happen. And that's how you dance with the system. That's how you kind of influence the system. So let's have a conversation later. I'd love to hear more about your work. Yeah. An online question?
Yes, we have an online question from Anna Podorova. How many students, it's a two-parter, how many students would take part in each workshop? And two, were there any students from diverse linguistic and cultural backgrounds?
Yes, so I think we had a bit of a challenge with the first workshop. Good question, thank you. Had a bit of a challenge with the first workshop, partly around advertising and marketing, and people didn't actually know it was on very well, so we didn't have a great turnout. The second workshop went a lot better. We had about a dozen students or so. It's hard because you think, oh, so many people, we're going to have hundreds of students, but they actually don't. It's funny, you build it and they don't come sometimes, but we had enough in the second session, so that's good. The students are very, very diverse, not so much linguistically diverse in terms of international students as such, because international students tend to go down another pathway. The college tends to have students who are very diverse culturally if you're talking about class and culture. Definitely from different cultural backgrounds, rural backgrounds, non-traditional learning backgrounds. Diverse, yes, but not necessarily linguistically and culturally in the way that we think about it. So, yes, I hope that helps. Age, tend to be younger, I think. What about in the last workshop? I was away for that. So majority, so there may be a generational thing going on there. I hope that. Gender split are pretty mixed. Pretty okay there? Yeah. So I hope that answers the question, Anna. Thanks.
Hi, Nick Faulkner from the University of Adelaide.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Chad. We talk a lot online. There are a number of cultures where, in order to get the rankings up, in order to deal with the pressures of academia, students are put under incredible pressure at school. Play is not a part of what they do. And there are places where it's positively frowned upon to be flippant. So the two questions I have is, have you seen evidence of that kind of destructive anti-play culture in the workshops that you've run? And the second is, do you consider a knowledge of play to be an undervalued part of cultural capital?
Answer to the second question, absolutely, 100%. I think it's enormously undervalued. It's funny when you start talking about Lego serious play, people go, oh yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that's good. I do that with my kids. Yeah, I know. That's good. So it is very undervalued. I think there's, particularly in Australia, I have to say. So in Europe, things are quite different, particularly in Denmark. This kind of makes sense. In Danish schools, Lego and playful forms are everywhere. It's just everywhere. It's just part of it. Even in corporate culture, to some extent, in Scandinavia and Europe, there's a lot more openness to kind of playful approaches and things like that. So yes, I think it's vastly undervalued. Evidence of that in the project, not so much. Certainly not among students, certainly not in the room, because who would dare say anything against play with me in the room? And it's a very unsafe thing to say. Interestingly, in the wider institution, a little bit. So in some of the kind of, some of the partners and some of the people kind of really indirectly associated with the project, there's a bit of, I don't know, some raised eyebrows a little bit and things like that. And there's that problem that people won't say it either. So I think it might be an undertow in some of the things that are kind of going on. So yeah, does that answer sort of? Thanks.
Okay, question from online from Peter Balan. Hi, Peter. Sounds like a lot of fun. How does all this correlate with results, e.g. grades? Are there control groups to identify such a correlation?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for your question. I think I remember your teaching breakfast workshop here as well. No correlation at all, actually. It's actually a question I'm not very interested in, I'm afraid to say. I think that not everything that is important can be measured. That's kind of what I'd say. I think that there is plenty of work, plenty of focus on results, grade, measures, correlations, NAPLAN. Actually, someone couldn't come to the session this morning because it's a NAPLAN week and they've got staff away. And I thought, that's a great example of one of the problems that we have in education. So I'm actually not hugely concerned with KPIs and results and things like that. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that makes the whole approach, makes it problematic, maybe make it irrelevant in the current climate. Maybe, I know there's that challenge there. So yeah, we haven't done any work on that, and to be honest, we kind of probably won't. So that might not have been the question you were after, the answer you were after, or a bit of a challenging answer. So yeah, but I'd like to talk to you more about that, about why do we, I mean, I've got a long experience in enabling education and academic language and learning, and that's always the thing that comes up. So you go and you run a program or you run a workshop for students on how to write an essay or how to do exams or whatever, and always the question is, did that improve their results? Did they get better results? All that sort of thing, because we want to measure it, of course, I understand that. But I've kind of been having that question for about 20 years, so I'm, kind of letting that one go a bit. Sorry.
Thanks, Chad. Okay, last question. I'm afraid we're running out of time.
Yes. Come and talk to me if you've got more questions or want a conversation. That'd be great.
Thank you again. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed the stuff about the haptic experience, which is really important for interior and architecture
And design.
students and design. I teach a lot of construction courses, design courses, and computers, etc. So this is the bridging area.
Yeah.
One of the ways we've found of bridging that gap you were talking about, the scanning process potentially, is using some software called Recap, photogrammetry, which is just using cameras from phone or any kind of device, uploading it to cloud, comes back as mesh, send it straight off to a laser printer. And we're actually doing it now. So there's some second years standing outside right now waiting for us to finish, and some of them have done that with Lego outcomes.
Cool.
So it might be worth having a look.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank
fantastic. You. Thank you all very much for coming, and thank you
Thanks,
for our
Chad.
online
Round of
attendees.
applause for Chad. Okay, thanks very much. A little bit of housekeeping. I'll send out a recording of this session to everybody who registered, so you can look forward to seeing that. And please keep an eye out for the hands-on session. We'll advertise that either today or tomorrow. And thank you everybody who brought along a cup. That was really good. We're trying to keep the plastic down, and I think it's worked really well. So thank you for your effort in that regard. And now you can go and wash your own cups. Oh yes, that was all. Yeah. Return your minifigures to Chad. Thank you.